Have you ever felt stuck, like no matter what you do, nothing changes? What if I told you this feeling has a name and a dangerous consequence? This is the psychology of learned helplessness, and it might be quietly sabotaging your motivation, your relationships, and your mental health. In the 1960s, Martin Seligman conducted a now infamous study that forever changed the way we view human behaviour. Ironically, this study involved dogs and electric shocks. In this study, dogs were divided into 3 groups and placed into one of 3 different enclosures. In the first group, dogs were given a series of electric shocks which they could terminate at any time by using their nose to press on a panel located within their enclosure. The second group of dogs were yoked to the dogs in the first group. In other words, they received exactly the same pattern of shocks. The only difference was that the panel in their enclosure was non-functional. The third group of dogs were just placed in their enclosure for the equivalent duration but didn't receive any shocks at all. Later on, the dogs in each of the conditions were placed in a new enclosure whereby they could escape the administration of an electric shock by simply jumping over a very low barrier into the opposite side of the enclosure. The dogs who'd originally been in the first condition of the study, who'd learned that they could terminate the electric shocks, quickly jumped over the low barrier to avoid future shocks. The dogs who'd originally been in the second group, who didn't have the ability to terminate the electric shocks, well, they just laid down and whimpered in anticipation of the next shock. They didn't even try and escape, even though it was perfectly possible. This behaviour became known as learned helplessness. Unfortunately, learned helplessness is not limited to dogs. Decades of research has shown the same pattern of behaviour occurs in humans too. A foundational early example of such research involved participants being exposed to loud, unpleasant noises. Some participants had access to a button that they could use to terminate the noise. Other participants, like the dogs in the yoked condition, had access to a button that appeared to be functional but actually didn't work. Later on, both groups of participants were asked to solve simple puzzles where success was clearly possible and the participants all had control over the outcome. Sure enough, participants who'd originally been assigned to the condition in which the termination of the loud aversive noises was not possible quickly gave up on trying to solve the puzzles, even though a solution was eminently possible. In essence, these participants were showing the same pattern of behaviour as the dogs in Seligman's original experiment. After learning their behaviour had no effect, they carried that expectation of helplessness into a new situation in which their behaviour could have affected a positive outcome. Consequently, they put little or no effort into the task at hand because they didn't think it would make a difference. In contrast, participants who were originally assigned to the condition in which they could terminate the loud aversive noises persevered with the puzzles for longer and were more likely to solve them. When we repeatedly face setbacks that we don't think we can control, we stop believing that our actions matter, and therefore stop looking for solutions that may be right in front of us. So how can we avoid succumbing to learned helplessness? Here's the good news. If helplessness can be learned, it can also be unlearned. Seligman's later research focused on how changing the way that we explain adversity can help protect us against learned helplessness. One powerful takeaway from this line of research is to challenge the explanations you give yourself when things go wrong. For example, instead of thinking something like, "I failed because I'm no good at this," you could reframe this thought as, "The task was hard and I need more practice." This small shift in the way you attribute setbacks can increase your sense of control and your willingness to persevere when the going gets tough. A positive attribution style is kind of like the opposite of learned helplessness. Research shows us that people with more positive attribution styles are much more likely to bounce back from failure and avoid the trap of learned helplessness. Be good to yourselves and each other, and I'll see you in the next video.